This is when Gen X ruled the multiplex, where I look at the films that shaped the MTV generation. August of 1985 saw the release of 3 science-themed teen films, all of which were in theaters at the same time. Weird Science and My Science Project, which were both comedic romps with big, ridiculous sci-fi twists, and today's pick, Real Genius, which is also a comedy, but one that's more grounded in reality. Real Genius was directed by Martha Coolidge, director of Valley Girl, and was written by Neil Israel, Pat Proft, and PJ Torokvei, credited here under her dead name, Peter Torokvei, from a story idea by Israel and Proft. The previous year, Neil Israel had directed Bachelor Party, which he co-wrote with Proft. They also co-wrote the first Police Academy film. We open in space, where a sleek and streamlined space shuttle piloted by an astronaut played by Stacy Peralta, the pro skater who would go on to direct the acclaimed documentary Dogtown and Z-Boys, fires a perfectly targeted laser beam at the Earth and incinerates a man sitting by a pool. This turns out to be a video presentation at CIA headquarters, where Major Carnicle, played by Luis Giambalvo, briefs the assembled top-ranking operatives on the progress of this laser beam, which is being developed by renowned physicist Jerry Hathaway, a professor at Pacific Technical University, and which, as the video demonstrates, is slated to be used to assassinate enemies of the United States. Professor Hathaway appears at a regional high school science fair to tell 15-year-old genius Mitch Taylor that he's been granted early acceptance to Pacific Tech. Mitch is played by Gabe Jarrett, who's had a pretty busy career with supporting roles in film and television, though he's best known for this performance. Hathaway is played by William Atherton, whom you almost certainly know as the arrogant EPA agent Peck in Ghostbusters, or as the supercilious reporter in Die Hard. Between Ghostbusters, Die Hard, and Real Genius, Atherton was the first choice of directors in the 80s to play slithery and detestable characters. We meet Chris Knight, a dazzlingly brilliant senior at Pacific Tech who is interviewing with an electronics company for a post-graduation job. Chris, who shows up for his very serious and important interview wearing dealy boppers and an I Love Toxic Waste t-shirt, is mouthy and irreverent. He's played by Val Kilmer, who'd made his screen debut the previous year in the spy comedy Top Secret, and who'd go on to become a highly bankable Hollywood star with showy turns in Top Gun, Tombstone, and The Doors. Oh, and he was also Batman. On paper, Mitch is the protagonist of Real Genius, but Chris is clearly the star. That's not a knock against Gabe Jarrett, who is utterly plausible as an awkward and earnest teen genius. But apart from being startlingly good-looking, Val Kilmer is also very charismatic and charming as Chris, and he turns in the kind of flashy performance where you know you're looking at a future movie star. During the interview, Chris flirts with Sherry Nugel, who is a groupie for geniuses. She informs Chris that she has slept with 7 of the top 10 most brilliant minds in America. Sherry is played by Patty D'Arbonville, who appeared in Andy Warhol's Flesh and who was the inspiration for the Cat Stevens song Lady D'Arbonville. Throughout most of the 80s, she was involved in a highly publicized long-term relationship with Don Johnson, with whom she has a son, actor Jesse Johnson. Mitch arrives at Pacific Tech, which is clearly modeled after Caltech, the California Institute of Technology in Pasadena, and goes to a reception hosted by the university president. At one point, Mitch collides with another student and they exchange apologies, and the internet is sharply divided as to whether this is an uncredited cameo by Tom Hanks. I myself am undecided. I can see reasons why Hanks, who was far from a household name in 1985, would do a cameo. The Real Genius screenwriters, after all, are the director and writer of Bachelor Party, which Hanks had starred in the previous year, and his Bachelor Party co-star Robert Prescott will show up soon as Mitch's nemesis Kent. But I really don't know. To my eyes, this guy doesn't look quite like Hanks, but he doesn't look quite unlike him either. Mitch finds his dormitory, which is utter chaos. He's alarmed when a shaggy-haired man enters his dorm room and, without saying a word, enters his closet, closes the door, and vanishes. Mitch meets his roommate, who turns out to be Chris, who is free-spirited and jocular, whereas Mitch is uptight and awkward. Mitch has been assigned to work on Hathaway's laser project, along with a snooty upperclassman named Kent, played by Bachelor Party's Robert Prescott. Chris is also supposed to be working on the project, but he's much too busy goofing off to get much work done. Mitch immediately earns Kent's wrath by identifying a mistake Kent has made with his laser arrangement. As brilliant as all these kids are, it doesn't dawn on anyone on the team that they are, in fact, building a top-secret government weapon. Chris, with the help of fellow student Ick, played by Mark Kamayama, fills the dormitory and common rooms with chemically manufactured ice so that everyone can go skating and sledding. Mitch has a meet-cute with hyperkinetic student Jordan, played by Valley Girl's Michelle Meyrink. A mutual attraction develops between them, so much so that Jordan promptly stays up all night to knit Mitch a sweater, which she proudly gives to him while he's just trying to take a whiz in the men's room. Mitch is alarmed by Chris's continued irreverence and zany hijinks, which include using fake coins made of discs of liquid nitrogen attention on the coffee chocolate soup vending machine located in their dorm's kitchen. If my dormitory had had a coffee chocolate soup vending machine, I would have had a much happier college experience. Mitch keeps encountering the reclusive, shaggy-haired man who lives in their closet, who is named Laszlo and who is played by John Grease, best known as Roger Linus on Lost. Mitch finds a secret entrance in the closet to a rickety yet elaborate underground compound where Laszlo lives. Formerly Pacific Tech's most brilliant student, Laszlo had a breakdown when he realized his work was being used to develop weapons, and he's been living in the bowels of the school ever since. Chris meets with Hathaway at his home, which Hathaway is remodeling with funds for his laser project skimmed from the CIA. Hathaway, who reveals his deep-seated loathing of popcorn when Chris tries to bring a bag into the house, puts pressure on Chris to complete work on the laser. Chris, however, feels that Mitch has been working much too hard on the project, so he distracts him by forming a trail of lasers across the campus, which leads to a lecture hall which Chris has filled with water. He's invited the bikini-clad students from a local beauty school to join them for a pool party, at which Dawn Henley's All She Wants to Do Is Dance and Bryan Adams's One-Night Love Affair play. Chris and Mitch's fellow students at this party include Fenton, played by Yuji Okamoto, best known as the villainous yet super hot Chosen in Karate Kid Part 2, and Milton, played by Dean Devlin, screenwriter and producer of such Hollywood blockbusters as Stargate, Independence Day, and Godzilla. Mitch and Jordan grow closer at the party, which is interrupted by Hathaway, who bawls Mitch out for having fun instead of working on the laser. Upset, Mitch calls home and tells his parents he wants to leave the school. Kent secretly records Mitch's teary phone call and plays it over the PA system in the mess hall to humiliate Mitch. Chris cheers up Mitch by revealing that he too used to be super serious and perpetually stressed during his first few years at Pacific Tech before he decided not to take anything seriously. He talks Mitch into helping him with a zany prank in which they transport Kent's car into his dorm room. Chris drops by Hathaway's house while he's talking with the CIA operatives heading up the laser project, Major Carnigal, and Decker, who is played by character actor Ed Lauter. Also present is Decker's beautiful young daughter Susan, played by Valley Girl star Deborah Foreman. Remember how I mentioned that Real Genius is written by the people who gave us Bachelor Party and Police Academy? Overall, I enjoy most 80s sex comedies because I enjoy crude and tacky humor, but they often contain moments that haven't aged well. Real Genius is obviously less of an outright sex romp than Bachelor Party, but while overall the humor in Real Genius has held up pretty well, this scene between Chris and Susan is a disaster. Within seconds of meeting Susan, Chris suggests she's stupid and then loudly announces to Hathaway, Carnigal, and Decker that she's got a great body. I have no idea why Chris is so aggressively cruel to Susan, whom he's never met before. I gather it's supposed to be flirtatious, but it sure seems like he's trying to humiliate her in front of a group of older men, which is not a good look for Chris. At least Susan gets a good moment where she tells Chris that she's only interested in him if he can hammer a 6-inch spike through a board with his penis, which is a broad, crude joke that is also, in my opinion, pretty unexpected and funny. After Susan and the CIA dudes leave, Hathaway tells Chris that he's fed up with him slacking off on the laser project, and thus he's going to ensure that Chris doesn't graduate. To rub salt into the wound, he's also going to give Chris's promised post-graduation job at the electronics company to Kent. Chris is devastated by this. This time, the roles are reversed, and it falls to Mitch to give Chris a pep talk. We get a montage of Chris dedicating himself to being a model pupil by studying hard, attending all his classes, and working long hours to perfect his laser. Here's another moment that hasn't held up well. Mitch returns to his dorm room and finds Sherry Nugel waiting for him because she's working her way through the list of the most brilliant minds in America, and now it's Mitch's turn to sleep with her. She tells Mitch that she's waited 3 years for this moment, which doesn't make it better, Sherry. Mitch turns Sherry down and hooks up with Jordan instead, thus preventing Sherry from committing a felony by boffing a 15-year-old kid. Chris aces Hathaway's final exam, but Kent sabotages the laser and it self-destructs. Chris is momentarily distraught, but then he comes up with a way to rebuild it bigger and more powerful. Chris and Mitch triumphantly show off their better-than-ever laser to a pleased Hathaway, who informs Chris that he will graduate. Chris, Mitch, Jordan, and Ick go out to dinner to celebrate. They're unexpectedly joined by Laszlo, who points out what should have been obvious to them all much earlier. They've just designed a laser powerful enough to be fired at a precise target from space, and thus they've designed a very dangerous weapon. Chris and Mitch race to the lab and find that Hathaway has already packed up their laser and delivered it to the CIA. They dose Kent with knockout gas and install a radio transmitter in his braces. Mitch pretends to be Jesus and speaks to Kent through his braces to get him to tell them where the laser is located. Mitch and Chris fill Hathaway's home with tons of unpopped popcorn, then don wacky disguises and sneak onto a military base to secretly change the laser's positioning. When the CIA tries to test the laser by blowing up a decoy, the laser strikes Hathaway's home while Kent is inside and pops all the popcorn. The newly remodeled home, which is Hathaway's pride and joy, falls apart at the seams from the pressure of all the popcorn. As the house topples, Laszlo pulls up in an RV that he won from entering a Frito-Lay sweepstakes millions of times. Sherry Nugel is with him, and as Laszlo is #1 on her list of the most brilliant minds in the country, they're going to get married. As the Tears for Fears hit Everybody Wants to Rule the World plays, Laszlo and Sherry drive off into the horizon, while Mitch, Chris, Jordan, and Ick celebrate their triumph over Hathaway. That final scene with the popcorn, which is the part everyone remembers about Real Genius, involved no special effects whatsoever. The filmmakers flooded the home with 140 tons of popcorn, which was popped on site. It's a fun, ridiculous climax to a fun, ridiculous film. The basic story beats of Real Genius share a lot of common ground with a lot of other 80s college-based comedies, including Revenge of the Nerds, Back to School, Johnny Be Good, and God Help Us All, Soul Man. Zany hijinks, hot girls in bikinis, blundering yet vindictive nemesis, all-night studying montages. What makes Real Genius unique is that all of the characters are brilliant and eccentric, and the film does a good job of selling that angle. Martha Coolidge interviewed students at nearby Caltech, home of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and incorporated their experiences into the film. The character of Laszlo, for example, was based on a real-life Caltech student who lived in a secret lair beneath one of the buildings on campus. Real Genius's set design, the graffiti-covered and debris-strewn corridors of Chris and Mitch's dormitory, was inspired by the decor of Caltech students. Pacific Tech is very believable as a place where smart, interesting kids would congregate, and much of the film's charm lies in the constant chaos of scientific innovation, like the ice skating in the corridor and the non-stop science experiments that often go wrong. Real Genius makes some mistakes. Not all the jokes land, and by the time Mitch is posing as Jesus and giving Kent divine orders not to masturbate, the film comes close to outstaying its welcome. But it sticks the landing with the popcorn sequence and winds up being pretty satisfying. Mostly, though, Real Genius's enduring impact on Gen X has been the way it normalized geek culture and made the combination of being extremely smart and having highly specialized interests seem natural and appealing. I touched on this a few weeks back with my analysis of War Games, but Real Genius is a stronger example. The first Revenge of the Nerds film hit theaters in the summer of 1984, and Real Genius came out 1 year later, but between the two films, there's a sea change in the way smart young people are depicted on film. While the nerds in Revenge of the Nerds are a brainy yet socially awkward tribe who all dress, think, and behave in similar ways, the smart kids of Pacific Tech show there's not one way to be a genius. You can be sexy and irreverent like Chris, or super serious like Mitch, or hyper like Jordan, or reclusive like Laszlo, or a suck-up like Kent, or even corrupt and arrogant like Hathaway. Today, the concept that super smart people aren't all bespectacled nerds with pocket protectors is a no-brainer, but back in 1985, it was reassuring to think that you could be as cool as Val Kilmer and still be the smartest kid in the room. Next time, we're gonna cut loose. Footloose. Kick off your Sunday shoes with the 1984 teen classic. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you then.